Chair, please. So anytime you're ready, Mr. Low.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and members. This is Assembly Bill 2943, which would clarify that conversion therapy is a fraudulent practice in the state of California under the Consumer Legal Remedies Act. This bill is co-authored by all 8 members of the LGBT Legislative Caucus. We also want to make it very clear that the American Psychological Association Task Force issued a report declaring that this practice poses significant health risk and contributes to anti-LGBT stigma. The American Psychiatric Association, the American Psychological Association, the American Counseling Association, the National Association of Social Workers, the American Medical Association all oppose this practice on the basis that this is not evidence-based and that this would hurt an individual's mental health. As you may know, back in 2012, SB 1172 by Senator Liu banned conversion therapy for individuals under the age of 18 years old. This bill only applies in cases where a consumer transaction takes place, which is that a consumer makes a payment for goods or services. And so it's very narrow and tailored with respect to consumer transactions. You may hear from individuals in opposition that this is an attack on religious freedom or free speech. Having said that, it is well noted in the committee analysis as well that the United States Supreme Court has declined review of the previous version of California's SB 1172 law banning conversion therapy for minors on 2 separate occasions. Once when facing a challenge to the law asserting that it violated free speech rights, and a second time facing a challenge to the law asserting that it violated religious rights. As such, the California Ninth Circuit opinions on both of these matters continue to uphold the previous SB 1172. With me today in support are Doug Haldeman, former president of the California Psychological Association, Dr. Michael Ferguson, a survivor of conversion therapy, and Anthony Sampson, an expert and attorney, to answer any technical questions that we may have. And I would like to defer the remaining time to witnesses in support. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Before we go to our witnesses, I'd like to establish a quorum. Madam Secretary, please call roll.
Chow.
Here.
Chow here. Kylie.
Here.
Kylie here. Baker. Berman. Calderon. Here. Calderon here. Irwin. Irwin here. Mullen. Obernolte. Obernolte here. Reyes. Reyes here. Ting.
And I'd like also to take care of our consent agenda. Would somebody? The consent agenda has been moved and seconded. Madam Secretary, please call roll on the consent agenda.
File item number 7, AB 2163, do pass as amended, and file item number 8, AB 2676, do pass as amended to appropriations. Chow.
Aye.
Chow, aye. Kylie.
Aye.
Kylie, aye. Baker. Berman. Baker, aye. Berman. Calderon.
Aye.
Calderon, aye. Irwin. Aye. Irwin, aye. Mullen. Obernolte. Aye. Obernolte, aye. Reyes. Aye. Reyes, aye. Ting.
Thank you very much. I apologize for the interruption. Let's now go to our first witness.
Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Douglas Haldeman. I am the immediate past president of the California Psychological Association and professor and chair of the doctoral program in clinical psychology at John F. Kennedy University in Pleasant Hill. The California Psychological Association believes that there is no basis for attempting to change sexual orientation for 4 main reasons. First, that same-sex attractions and behaviors are not a form of mental illness requiring treatment. Secondly, that so-called conversion therapy is not really a legitimate form of therapy, given that there is no scientific evidence supporting it. 3, that these methods pose a substantial risk of harm to the individual. And 4, that there are numerous therapeutically legitimate methods for addressing the concerns of people who are questioning their sexual orientation without resorting to conversion therapy. For 35 years, I have conducted research and written policy in this area, as well as having maintained a clinical practice that included hundreds of boys and men who had undergone some form of so-called conversion therapy, including aversive interventions such as genital electric shock and nausea-inducing drugs, a variety of behavioral methods, residential treatments involving forced isolation from families, humiliation, and so forth. None of these methods were effective at changing one's sexual orientation, and in fact, usually exacerbated the person's already substantial guilt and self-loathing. It's difficult to document all of the harms associated with these methods that I have observed over the years in short time, but one patient stands out who was so overwhelmed with guilt for his inability to change, as well as the grief that came from having been ostracized by his family and community, that he struggled with chronic depression, sexual dysfunction, and suicidal ideation for years. When I asked him why he had tried so hard to change who he is, he replied, quote, "In my world, I felt it was what I needed to do to stay alive, although what I'm living now doesn't feel like much of a life." Efforts to change sexual orientation don't work, and they pose substantial risk to vulnerable persons. Accordingly, CPA believes that it is in the interest of the state, in fact, it is the responsibility of the state, to accurately identify these practices as consumer fraud. Placing such activities under the Consumer Legal Remedies Act serves to put the purveyors of conversion therapies on notice that they can no longer get away with marketing these dangerous practices. But it serves another equally important function, sending a message to LGBT and questioning persons of all ages that there is nothing wrong with you. It is time for the state of California, once and for all, to put an end to these deceptive and dangerous practices. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Next witness, please.
To the committee chair and to the honorable members of this assembly, I sincerely thank you for the opportunity to be here today and to share part of my story with you. My name is Michael Ferguson, and I'm a survivor of these so-called conversion therapy practices. By way of personal introduction, please let me start by saying that I'm a lifelong student of the sciences. I received my bachelor's degree in biochemistry and my PhD in bioengineering, specializing in functional brain imaging. Upon completion of my PhD, I did my first postdoctoral fellowship at Cornell University in the Department of Human Development, and I'm currently doing a second postdoctoral fellowship in cognitive neurology at a teaching hospital for Harvard Medical School. I share all of this for the purpose of emphasizing that I've been lifelong committed to the sciences and to the scientific method as it's applied to human nature. Yet, in spite of my scientific life resume, I am sorry and I'm frankly embarrassed to say that I was sucked in and duped by the charlatans of conversion therapy. As a young man, I grew up with a close family connection to my parents and my siblings. However, conversion therapists shattered these relationships. Conversion therapists told me that my parents were at fault for my homosexual nature. They said my father failed me by being too distant and my mother failed me by being too close. At a time in my life when I needed more than ever to run toward an emotional support system that my family could have provided to me, I was instead administered emotional poison, and I was taught to feel outrage, hostility, and anger toward my family members for supposedly making me gay. Because of the lies of conversion therapy, I became filled with bitterness toward my parents and my family, a bitterness that estranged us, that multiplied our sorrows, and that pushed me further and further into the dark night of pathological loneliness, emotional isolation, and yes, self-hatred. I am truly blessed that after nearly a decade, I was able to escape this downward spiral that conversion therapy creates and to rebuild my relationships with my family. Too many are not as lucky. Conversion therapists systematically prey on the most vulnerable and the self-loathing. They exact monetary profits from them, and they lead them further away from the authentic help and emotional support that they need. Some of its misguided advocates will tell you that conversion therapy is a matter of religious belief. Well, if conversion therapy is about religious belief, then why is there a lucrative industry profiting off of it? Anyone making money and profiteering under the banner of religious faith blasphemes the religious faith. I wish that I had known how dangerous and outright fraudulent conversion therapy was before I started on that path. I implore you, please protect members of our society like me from being defrauded and profoundly harmed by the pseudoscience and the junk therapy of so-called conversion methods by passing this bill and making a clear statement that the sale of conversion therapy, whatever you may call it, is fraud. Thank you very much.
Thank you much. Next witness, please. And yes, if you can identify yourself and also the organization that you're affiliated with, as well as your position. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and committee members. Joe Michael for Equality California. We are proud to be a co-sponsor of this bill along with the Trevor Project, who, although they were not able to be here today, would also like to state their support through me. So we are co-sponsoring this bill because the practices you heard about today are tremendously dangerous and damaging to people who are LGBTQ. Conversion therapy, as it is often called, does not work, and it damages people who are exposed to it. It's very important that California statute be clear on this issue, so we urge the committee's support today. Thank you.
Thank you. Additional individuals in support of the bill, please step forward. Seeing none, let's go to opposition. Do we have additional chair? If not, maybe three of you can sit up here for now. And oh, there we go. That works.
Did you want to sit right here? Yeah. Sure.
Welcome. Thank you all for being here. So, when you're ready, you may proceed. Let's start with our first witness.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor to be here. I'm Dr. Joseph Nicolosi Jr., licensed clinical psychologist in the state of California. I received my PhD from the Chicago School of Professional Psychology, and I'm here with the National Task Force for Therapy Equality. For the past 9 years, I've offered therapy to countless individuals who are seeking therapeutic help to find answers to questions over same-sex attraction and gender identity confusion. My practice was founded by my father, who helped thousands of people over the 40-year span of his career. In our work, the client is in the driver's seat. He sets his own goals, which the therapist helps him achieve. We use evidence-based treatment interventions, the same methods used by other clinics throughout the world to treat trauma and sexual addiction. As those underlying dynamics are resolved, the client's unwanted same-sex feelings often diminish as a result. But AB 2943 threatens the ability of my clients to continue to seek and obtain the help they want. Through its ban on the vaguely defined practice of sexual orientation change efforts or conversion therapy, the bill would potentially jeopardize the well-respected and scientifically sound treatments that myself and many licensed professionals have been offering to willing adults for decades. The bill is premised on inaccurate claims and mischaracterizations of the type of work I do. For example, the bill includes in Section 1, letter B, that the APA task force, quote, concluded that sexual orientation change efforts can pose critical health risks. But the very report from which these conclusions is drawn actually states that those health risk concerns are not based upon verifiable empirical data. In that particular section of the report, it says it is, quote, anecdotal, unprovable stories, and even the report itself concedes that it should be taken, quote, tentatively. In fact, that task force report details examples of clients who received benefits from the therapies banned by AB 2943. Further, multiple presidents of the American Psychological Association have publicly come forward stating their opposition to therapy bans, saying they violate patient rights. You will find the full references in the Therapy Equality handout, reference number 13. This bill arguably compels the therapist to violate the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment by prohibiting a therapist from offering certain services to LGBT individuals that he offers to heterosexual clients. In this sense, the legislation demands discrimination based on sexual orientation. I have a better solution. How about we let adults make their own decisions about what goals and objectives they want to pursue in therapy? The state has no business telling someone that their therapy goals are illegal. I'm available for any questions.
Thank you very much. Next witness, please.
Thank you and good afternoon, Chairman Chow and
Welcome.
committee members. Thank you so much for the opportunity to address you on AB 2943. I currently live in Oregon, but when I was a youth, 6th grade on, I lived in California all the way up through 25 years old. And it was during that time that I struggled with same-sex attraction and embraced homosexuality going into college at UC Santa Barbara. Embraced that, but unfortunately my own sense of well-being declined as I found people to support my homosexual desire, my homosexual identity. I felt less stable than prior. And that is the experience of some of the people that come to Restored Hope, which I run now. I'm the executive director of Restored Hope Network, which is a coalition of ministries all across the U.S., 13 of which are here in the state of California. So that's for people who find themselves dealing with unwanted same-sex attraction. And I find that to be a subset of the overall GLBT community. It's not the entire community, but there are some people who are deeply troubled by their own same-sex attraction and surrounded by a sea of witnesses that say you must embrace this. They feel despondent and suicidal. I've had 3 such individuals recently come to me saying, you know, you gave us the first hope in a long time. And it's a hope that I personally have experienced. Because of dealing with my own unwanted same-sex attraction, I had the freedom to become a mother of 3 sons who are now 21, 18, and 15 years old. And they're doing quite well. But what a remarkable opportunity that I would have forfeited had I pursued the route I was going. And as unstable as I was, perhaps committed suicide. I was very troubled by what I was dealing with. And everybody around me was affirming it. It wasn't a matter of lack of affirmation. So again, what I'm suggesting is all these resources that were, some of which were around, but most were not, these would be banned in the state of California for those who actually are troubled by their unwanted same-sex attraction. All of these books, some represent the Southern Baptist community, some from regular conservative Baptists, some from all sorts of associations across the United States who dealt with homosexuality in a slightly different way and found affirming and kind care, not coercive, not aversion, none of the above. Those individuals, all of those materials, and this is a small subset of my bookshelf in my office, would be banned in the state of California. And not only that, but a very special book to me, the Bible, which declares such were some of you in 1 Corinthians 6, chapter 6, verse 11. So that would be prohibited from being purchased if it were in response to, I'm dealing with unwanted same-sex attraction, where can I find hope? If somebody suggested across a fence, you should go buy a Bible and read 1 Corinthians, guess what? That would fall under this bill. So respectfully, I find this bill, unfortunately, to be draconian in its measures. It's an overreach. It doesn't respect those who are dealing with homosexuality as much as it disrespects those who do not wish to embrace homosexual desire, people like me and others along the line. So although the individuals we heard earlier did not, in the end, wish to pursue such care, as an adult, they have the right to no longer do so. They can change their goal if they so wish. What we're prohibiting is the goal of leaving homosexuality with AB 2943. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next witness, please.
Good afternoon. My name is David Pickup. I'm a licensed psychotherapist. Almost all my clients are receiving therapy for unwanted same-sex attractions caused by emotional and or sexual abuse in childhood and beyond. I'm greatly saddened today because this bill says that my clients don't exist. This bill says that I don't exist. This bill says what I do is fraud and doesn't work. And worse, this bill and the witnesses you've heard just a few minutes ago intimate or actually claim that we use electroshock and shaming therapies, which is not only offensive, it's ludicrous at best. You'll notice they didn't give you any names of these people who supposedly created these horrors. I would ask, respectfully, the committee to ask for people so we can get rid of those licensed therapists, if they exist, and take away their licenses or throw them into jail for doing such horrible things. We don't do this junk. Authentic reparative therapy helped save my life. I'm a heterosexual man, but at 5 years old, I was playing hide and seek with neighbors when I was drawn into a tent by a young man who turned out to be a pedophile. My sexual organs were stimulated, and I was invited to stimulate his organs. These experiences were only one of the abuses that led to homosexual feelings. And as an adult, when I entered into professional therapy, my homosexual feelings disappeared over a period of years, and my sexual feelings for women greatly increased through licensed psychotherapy. I'm no longer aroused by men's bodies because therapy resolved the root causes of these feelings, which is the case for every single real client who identifies with this therapy. This is not inborn for these folks. In California, there are hundreds of men who have faced these same basic issues and experienced actual emotional change, not just behavioral change. Every single client who comes to our office feels and believes that their homosexuality was not genetic. Also, I'm deeply offended, with all due respect. I'm deeply offended because the authors of this bill and this committee and these witnesses have never contacted real reparative therapists or their clients to ask them how therapeutic change works and to at least know what this bill is trying to make illegal. Why haven't they done that? Without question, if our clients who report change in sexual feelings report dissipation of depression and anxiety, report feeling wonderful because their authentic selves have arisen through therapy, they will no doubt experience more depression, anxiety, and suicidal ideation, which is, of course, the exact opposite of what you heard the previous witnesses say. The crime here is that the intolerance presented here by taking away people's rights for therapy will destroy their lives. Everyone here in opposition respects, very much respects LGBT persons for having the right to believe and live authentically. This bill robs all the rest of us of the same respect. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just a reminder that we're at the 10-minute mark right now, so if I could ask the last witness to make it brief.
1 minute.
Okay. I'm Dr. Laura Haynes, licensed California clinical psychologist representing the National Task Force for Therapy Equality and the American College of Pediatricians. This is the one volume of the APA Handbook of Sexuality and Psychology. It says that same-sex attraction and gender identity are not biologically determined. There are psychological causes, and they do include childhood sexual abuse. Several rigorous studies have established that same-sex attraction, behavior, and identity, all three, change. And let's see. We're trying to hurry. Okay. And and the handbook says that many have experienced change. So feelings do change, and therapy is needed.
Thank you very much for your testimonies. Are there additional individuals who are in opposition to the bill? Please step forward. Please identify yourself and also the organization that you're affiliated with and your position. Welcome.
Hello, thank you for hearing me. My name is Elizabeth Wanning. I'm with Equipped to Love in Redding, California. I'm a former lesbian, and I oppose this bill for its infringement on countless women's rights to speak openly and seek healing from their life's experiences.
Just your name and organization and your position, please.
Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And next, please.
Hi, thank you. I'm Ken Williams, formerly gay, from Redding, California, representing Equipped to Love, and I oppose this bill because my 4 children thank me that I did benefit from the psychotherapy and all the resources.
Thank you very much. Next, please.
My name is Thomas Sierra Matero, and I'm from the Bay Area here, and I oppose this bill just on the basis of freedom, that if someone wants to purchase a therapy or purchase something, they would have freedom to choose whatever they would like.
Thank you very much. Next, please.
Hello, my name is Renee Martin from Yuba City, California. As director of Hearts of Hope, a ministry that helps people with unwanted same-sex attraction, I oppose this bill.
Thank you very much. Next, please.
Hello, I'm Pastor Dan Pelletier from Hamilton Square Baptist Church in San Francisco, and because I care about people, I drastically oppose this bill.
Thank you very much. Next, please.
My name is Pastor Tony Newhouse from Tabernacle Baptist Church in Concord, California. We have a bookstore where we sell materials. We don't want those things to be outlawed.
Thank you very much.
My name is Kerry Brown, pastor, Bible Baptist Church, Marysville, California, and I oppose this bill. It is an infringement on our Constitution
Thank you
and
very
religious rights.
Thank you, Pastor. Thank you. Next, please.
David Nolan from Marysville, and I oppose and encourage you to do the same.
Thank you very much. Next, please.
Jordan Gilreath, assistant pastor at Bible Baptist Church, and I oppose this bill.
Thank you, sir.
Jean Fisher from Castro Valley, California, co-director of the Hope Group. I urge you to oppose this bill as well.
Thank you very much.
David Fisher, the other co-director of Hope Group in Castro Valley. I ask you to oppose this bill.
Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, Kevin Snyder, Chief Counsel, Pacific Justice Institute, Center for Public Policy and Opposition. Thank you.
Thank you.
Pastor Mike Rogers, Faith Baptist Tabernacle, Awake America here in the Capitol. My Bible and my gospel is not a fraud. This bill is.
Thank you. Next, please.
Caroline Beltram from Brentwood, California, co-director of Truth and Love. Please oppose this bill.
Thank you very much.
Eric Steff, resident of California. I want you to know that I exist and I struggle with same-sex attraction and I found healing from brokenness and I exist.
Thank you very much.
My name is Todd Peterson. I'm a businessman here in Sacramento. I'm against AB 2943 as it restricts the rights of people to explore alternatives to a lifestyle they found dissatisfying for one reason or another.
Thank you very much.
My name is Jonathan Keller, president of California Family Council, California Family Alliance. We represent hundreds of thousands of Californians and thousands of churches as well. With respect to Assemblymember Low, we understand his, I think, position behind the bill, but we must respectfully oppose and believe it reaches too far. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Brandon Campbell, pastor of the Faith Baptist Church in Wheatland, California, and I ask you to oppose this infringement on our First Amendment rights.
Thank you very much.
Doug Wanning from Redding, California. I oppose this bill. I ask you to do the same. I think it's overreaching.
Thank you.
Karen Klinger, Sacramento. I ask and urge you to oppose this bill. You've received a letter from Orlene Curlis, State President of Eagle Forum, and I also want to thank all of you for coming. I do believe that there is time for people to become an adult, and thank you again for listening to us.
Thank you very much.
Hi, Ned DeLacy from the California Catholic Conference. Our letter's on file, and just question the use of the consumer code for this.
Thank you.
Greg Burt, California Family Council, in strong opposition.
Thank you very much.
Christy Bigelow from Redding, California, in opposition.
Thank you. Are there additional witnesses? Yes, please come forward.
I am Callie Allen with Moral Revolution, and I oppose this bill.
Any more individuals in opposition to the bill? Seeing and hearing none, I want to thank all of you for being here, as well as all the presenters from on both sides. So without additional witnesses, let's bring it back to the committee for questions and comments. And before we do that, can we have 2 chairs made available for the proponents as well? Sure. If you can have 2 chairs made available to, and you can have 2 and 2. How's that? With that, are there questions or comments from committee members? Yes, Ms. Baker. As soon as they're situated, then you can go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I actually have a lot. I want to be respectful of my colleagues' time. I want to be sure that we're really clear about what is and is not allowed under this statute, or under this bill. And because I've looked very carefully at the definitions, and I apologize that in another committee I missed your introductory points, so you may have already covered this in detail. But if you can answer in the context of, if I have a constituent who, on whatever journey they are on and understanding themselves better, wherever they are in life, is interested in exploring a conversation with someone about efforts to change behaviors, or just wants to reach out to someone that you may consider by definition covered by this, what options do they still have available to them under this bill, should it pass?
Sure. Excuse me again, Anthony Sampson with Arlen Porter. I think that one thing that needs to be sort of made clear here is the limited applicability, really, of the proposal here, that it applies in the context of the Consumer Legal Remedies Act, which requires a transaction to occur for services, and of course, advertising, offering to engage in sexual orientation change efforts within an individual in exchange for dollars would be precluded under this bill. But what's important to look at is what the definition is, and that definition of sexual orientation change efforts is one that seeks to change an individual's sexual orientation. So a mere conversation about the issue and one's desire to talk about it as an appropriate practice, one's desire to talk about it in a book and endorse it in a book, would not fall within the definition. That individual would need to seek to change an individual's sexual orientation. And so if that individual, your constituent that you mentioned, merely wants to have a conversation about what it is, that conversation can be had. But it's the moment where they cross that threshold of seeking to change an individual's sexual orientation, again, in exchange for dollars. All right? If this is a free service, it would not fall within the scope of the bill. It's limited under the Consumer Legal Remedies Act, which again requires that transaction to take place.
So if an individual wants to do more than just have an initial conversation but wants to try, and perhaps at one of the locations or practices or entities that's here in opposition to the bill that self-describes as caring and supportive, would they be able to do that under this bill?
If they sought out services for their sexual orientation issue, and the services provided are one to cope with that and to deal with it, that is okay. In fact, it's under the bill itself, it excludes under sexual orientation efforts. It does not include psychotherapies that include coping, social support, identity and exploration and development, including sexual orientation neutral interventions. And so there are conversations that can be had between your constituent and the therapist. But the moment the therapist seeks to change the individual sexual orientation, even if it's at the request of the patient, that's where this bill would apply. And again, that individual would be able to seek restitution, meaning recovery of the dollar amount that they spent for those services.
And so, in your belief, this is narrowly tailored. That it's just if there is a effort to engage in full change, but other elements which are already in statute is accepted. I mean, it's not actually an amendment. Your bill isn't changing. This is a current definition of coping, developing strategies for exploring. That is all still allowed as a transaction under your bill.
That's correct, because it's under an exemption.
It's an existing statute. Okay.
And to go even further, again, a lot of the opposition raised First Amendment issues, and those are important issues to raise.
Yes.
They're significant, and the committee should take them seriously. But I think when they do take them seriously, they will find that when the opposition's stacked books up, for example, again, individuals can express their opinion about this issue, and they can endorse it if they so choose in a published book. People can continue to sell books, but the moment, again, that definition of seeking to change an individual's sexual orientation triggers, then that's where this bill, again, would apply. But simply speaking about your position on the issue is something completely different, and that's one's ability to exercise their First Amendment rights.
Okay, because that was going to be one of my questions, is if I had a constituent who wanted to just have access to those books that are on the table. I'm not making, I'm loath to make choices for people. But they would still have, under your understanding of the statute, they would still have access to books about this.
Right. The literature on sexual conversion therapy can still exist under this bill. People can purchase literature about conversion therapy. It is the moment that the individual writing the book or the therapist, again, meeting with the patient, seeks to change the individual's sexual orientation. That's, again, where the bill triggers. So I think it is a very overly broad position to suggest that somehow the literature on sexual conversion therapy is going to be removed from the shelves as a result of this.
And I don't have experience with, the therapy. I do have with the statute as a lawyer. And this particular statute, there are some that argue what you would like to do is already accomplished under the existing law because the statute in California prohibits basically saying that you're going to accomplish something that you can't in a commercial transaction, it becomes a fraudulent transaction. So if you could address a little bit, because it's one of the reasons I was looking into this, why this is necessary to put this in the legislation as opposed to the existing statute, which, by the way, when there are lawsuits, it's one of the 3 or 4 statutes that's always charged, always made allegations about. And so we will see a lot of cases potentially why it's necessary to have this particular amendment to it, given that there are some who argue it already can happen. Anytime you try to do something and market and sell something in a consumer transaction that you believe is fraudulent, you are open to being sued under this statute.
Right. And so from there would have to ensue evidentiary proceedings with respect to sexual conversion therapy and expert testimony. The question, I think, for the legislature is whether, for purposes of this piece of legislation, whether that sexual conversion therapy ought to be considered to be a deceptive practice by its very terms under the Consumer Legal Remedies Act. And that's what this committee is considering today. And so the answer to your question is, sure, you could potentially make that argument and win or lose in court over the course of the litigation process. But because sexual conversion therapy is not called out as a fraudulent practice in the law today, that debate would have to be had in litigation proceedings, whereas under this, it would be considered to be fraudulent under the law.
I don't think you can, I could look into this, but you can't get attorney's fees, I don't think, under CLRA. You can get punitive damages,
restitution,
but not,
punitive, and you can seek injunctive relief. Yeah.
I think it's important the way you've tailored this to be very specific to a very specific actions to change. Because I don't want a constituent of mine to have a chilling effect as they're going through whatever they are trying to explore. We don't want just the opposite to happen, where they feel like they can't go to someone who would at least be able to answer their questions, or for the professional, reputable therapist to be able to provide that information. And so the importance of trying to have this as narrowly tailored as possible is key. And I think there are definitions already in existing law that have been decided by the Supreme Court of, I believe, the United States, at least in affirming the not addressing the Ninth Circuit's decision, that allows for that option to continue to be available. So I'm comforted by that, especially because I do have adult constituents who should be able to make decisions for themselves as they go through a journey I am unfamiliar with, but I don't want to tie their hands. So my final question goes to the religious, the concerns that this will squelch religious speech. That is important as well. I would be surprised if this doesn't have some constitutional challenge at some point, because these are really fundamental questions. If any of the proponents can address that, because that is important. My understanding is someone can still go to clergy or anyone who does not charge to this, they can still have that, so that if someone doesn't want to go to clergy, they can still go to someone else. But if you can address that point, I would be grateful.
If a church, as part of the services that it provides to its members, includes conversion therapy, they may continue to provide that service under this law. Again, because that transaction has to take place, right? The transaction of having to pay for that particular
goods and
service.
Understood. Yeah.
Right. And so, again, if it is free conversion therapy, if it is provided to its membership, then that is perfectly appropriate under the law. In order for the Consumer Legal Remedies Act applied, you have to have that exchange you have to have that transaction.
And many churches provide ministry to people who are not members, so that would be important as well, that you don't limit it to people who are just members.
Exactly, yeah.
And finally, I sort of had the flip side of this is there are some who would not want a person who is exploring options of their gender identity to find the only avenue they can go to is one that is faith-based. Mm-hmm. So for my constituent who does not want to go to a faith-based person for conversation and counseling on this, what does that person do if this bill passes? I'm just looking out for my constituents here, so...
And if I might, to the chair, the recognition that Dr. Haldeman, former president of the California Psychological Association, is also here to answer that question, if I might.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Assemblywoman, you said something a few moments ago that really belongs in this conversation. I think you said words to the effect of, I am loath to make choices for other people. Mm-hmm. That fits here because what we are addressing is not necessarily at all the therapist who is entertaining a conversation with reflective inquiry for all the complex reasons someone would want to consider changing their sexual orientation, but rather this focuses on the role of the therapist who is marketing something that a priori is seen as an effort to change your sexual orientation through whatever means. And so the onus really is on the practitioner to demonstrate that she or he is able to thoughtfully engage the person, all that requires, rather than a knee-jerk reflexive reaction that comes from this long discredited notion that there is something pathological or wrong about sexual orientation, or that one's sexual orientation derives from early life traumatic experiences. That is so old and discredited by the profession. I'm surprised it even comes into this room today. But really the focus is on, and so if you have a constituent who comes to you saying, gee, I really can't find anybody who's in the East Bay here who's willing to talk to me about this, this law does not affect that as long as the person is not marketing her or himself as a purveyor of changing your sexual orientation.
I appreciate that, and thank you. I've studied this very, very carefully with no particularly ideological window on here, and wanting to make sure that there are options available to someone going through a journey that I have not experienced. And I believe this is much more narrowly tailored than even the first time I read it. I thought that is one of the broadest, overbroad things I've ever seen, particularly for a statute that has very broad remedies and is used almost as the kitchen sink that you throw in court. I believe it does provide options for the constituents and people in our world who are looking for options for whom they need to seek different therapy and conversations with. And so I appreciate your thoughtfully answering the questions. I appreciate you bringing forward the bill. It's not a black and white issue. There are some tough questions here, but I appreciate your trying to keep it as focused as possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Opanolte, and then followed by Mr. Calderon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Assemblyman Low, I understand what you're trying to accomplish here. I will not be able to support the bill, but because of the respect that I have for you and the co-authors on the bill, I thought I'd take a minute and explain why. So to me, when I read through the bill, the operative parts of the bill is it seeks to establish sexual conversion therapy as what it calls a questionable practice of questionable scientific validity, and therefore a fraudulent business practice that should be outlawed. That's basically what the bill does. And we've had a spirited discussion here over the last few minutes about whether or not sexual conversion therapy is of questionable scientific validity. But to me, that entire discussion is misplaced because the operative point of the bill, in my opinion, is if a health-related practice is of questionable scientific validity, should it be against the law? And unfortunately, that is a very slippery slope, because regardless of what you feel about sexual conversion therapy, there is a wide variety of health practices that are practiced by millions of Californians that 90% of us here in the room would agree are of questionable scientific validity. And yet, we respect the rights for consenting adults to engage in those practices because at our base level, our society believes in freedom and liberty. So if we are going to say that this is of questionable scientific validity and should be outlawed, where do we stop? Do we call these practices into this chamber one by one and outlaw them and declare that they're against the law, regardless of the fact that they're practiced by millions of Californians? To me, that is the crux of the bill, and that's why I'm unable to support it today. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Cotterill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Assemblymember Low, for bringing this bill to the committee. And I also thank all the witnesses in support and opposition for your time and coming to speak to us. I mean, just to go over my understanding of the bill is that it would only ban advertising or engaging in sexual orientation change therapy where there is a commercial transaction with the goal of changing a person's sexual orientation. It would not impact individuals' ability to seek counsel from faith leaders or even therapy from religious groups, so long as the goal is not to change sexual orientation and there is no transaction. It does not include therapies that provide acceptance, support, or facilitate coping, identity exploration, or sexual orientation neutral interventions to prevent unlawful conduct, and do not seek to change sexual orientation, as well as the fact that there is court precedent that has upheld a California law banning conversion therapy for minors, making it unlikely, in my opinion, that courts would find this bill not to infringe on free speech or religious rights. I think, you know, a slippery slope. I think it's interesting to make that kind of an argument because as soon as there's somebody that comes into my office, which, by the way, everybody that comes into our offices to speak about a bill, whether they're in support or in opposition to the bill, the reality is that the message to us is that there's going to be no tomorrow if this bill does not pass or if this bill does pass. And I think it's interesting to make a slippery slope argument because, you know, you can make that argument, I think, for anything. You know, if you do this, well, it's potentially going to lead to other things that we're not trying to get at. Well, I think this bill is very straightforward when it comes to specific practices with regards to sexual orientation and conversion therapy as a means to fix it, which I'm not even sure I understand what that means or if that's even possible. I don't see that this bill, which is important to me, prohibits any individual from seeking any type of help or time to be able to meet with a therapist in any way, shape, or form. And so I think that you've taken a lot of time to narrowly tailor the bill to affect a specific issue. And it's an issue like individuals like myself take issue with this idea of conversion therapy. I don't believe in it, A. And B, I think that, you know, when I look at the individual groups that are in opposition, it does sadden me. I mean, I think the idea that we're not going to sell the Bible in California because of somehow this bill is going to prohibit, I think that's a ridiculous claim. And you know, when I think of church, first, I'm a big believer that, you know, we are all created in God's image regardless of how we are born. Whether that is we're gay, straight, transgender, bisexual, whatever, I think it is all purposeful. I think it is all meant to be, that was all by design. And to see so many religious groups in opposition, it does make me sad because there are a lot of people that have been hurt by these types of therapies. Right, in California, maybe we have better actors. Maybe we have more gentle actors and individuals taking the time to conduct this therapy in a different way. But in other areas, I think it's a lot different. I'm sure conversion therapy practices in California are probably a lot different than conversion therapies practices in the South. So, you know, I really do appreciate the time that everybody has taken to try to craft this bill in a narrowly tailored way. And look forward to voting aye. And, Mr. Chair, I move the bill.
Thank you very much. Mr. Ting.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, let me thank the author and the sponsors for bringing this bill forward. I did want to go back to just the analysis where we did talk about conversion conversion therapy, and we had a number of organizations, the American Psychiatric Association, the American Psychological Association, American Counseling Association, the National Association of Social Workers, and the American Medical Association. They all opposed the practice of sexual orientation change efforts on the basis that is not evidence-based and is potentially harmful to a patient's mental health. We also have our court system here in California that's recognized the practice of conversion therapy as a deceptive practice and that violates existing consumer fraud laws. So what we have is not really about science. What we have is whether or not this type of therapy actually could be harmful. And that's what we are talking about. That's why we're talking about consumer protection and whether or not we should be allowed to market this type of assistance to a consumer. So it's not about whether you believe it or don't believe it. This is really about us protecting consumers, which is much of what we do in privacy and BNP and many of the committees here, that we are trying to make sure that information is being given to those of us that are constantly consuming, and that it's fair, it's open, it's transparent, and that it really meets a measure of consumer education. So with these types of organizations, and again, these are all the primary health organizations that I think we would look to whether or not something is effective, something is working, something is okay to market to us as consumers of healthcare products. I think it's absolutely imperative based on the courts, based on these major healthcare organizations, that we stand with them, that we say that this kind of work shouldn't be marketed to consumers. It shouldn't be put out for public consumption, and that it should be concerned. Now, again, I think we've covered the First Amendment rights. We've covered the religious freedom rights. There is no infringement on free speech. There is no infringement on people to say what they believe, to express that viewpoint. But this is about a consumer transaction. This is about whether or not you should be allowed to advertise this type of service. And we have, again, every major healthcare organization all saying the same thing to us as a legislative body. So again, I very much appreciate the author for bringing this bill forward. I'll be happy to be honored to second this bill and also proudly to support this bill. I think it absolutely is something very important that we deliver this message to consumers all across the state of California.
Thank you very much. Mr. Berman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and for everyone who came today to testify on both sides. I want to echo the comments of a lot of my colleagues in thanking the author for bringing this bill forward. This isn't a kind of blunt instrument. This is, as a lot of folks have mentioned, a very narrowly crafted piece of legislation that is meant to take research done by medical experts from across the field, the American College of Physicians, the American Psychiatric Association, the American Medical Association, take all of that research and apply it to protect California's consumers. And that's exactly the type of legislation that we should be looking to pass. It's exactly the type of legislation I'm happy to support. You know, conversion therapy is a set of widely discredited practices that claim to be able to change a person's sexual orientation, change their gender identity or expression, or lessen their same-sex sexual attraction. And all this research already has identified that that's harmful for children and adults. And so for those reasons and more, I'm happy to support the bill today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Seeing no additional comments or questions, I want to thank everybody for being here today. I think it's been said before, but I think it's worth repeating. The bill does not ban any therapies that do not seek to change sexual orientation, does not ban any therapies that provide acceptance, support, and understanding of clients, or the facilitation of clients' coping, social support, and identity exploration and development, including sexual orientation neutral interventions to prevent or address unlawful conduct or unsafe sexual practices. Free therapies are not covered on this bill, and discussions between clergy and their parish are not covered. So I think it's important to repeat those. And it's been also mentioned that this bill is narrower than SB 1172, which has been challenged in court numerous times and has survived. The last being the United States Supreme Court twice, and the lower court's ruling was based on the fact that the law regulated conduct as opposed to First Amendment, religious freedom or freedom of speech. So I'm comfortable supporting the bill, but I do want to thank all of you for this very robust discussion. So
it hasn't been robust. With all due respect, you have not asked us any kind of rebuttal questions.
Point of order,
here.
Mr. Chair. He's out of line. You will respect the process.
Thank you very much. And I think today we've had.
Can you imagine your son going into therapy who's been sexually abused and whose homosexual feelings have been caused by a pedophile? What if it was your son, Assemblyman? What if it was your son? You would be guilty of having your son not be able to get reparative therapy. Or your own son.
Order, please.
I would embrace who he is and his decisions.
He's not born that way. That's the point. He's been sexually abused. Did you not listen to everything our witnesses have said?
If I may ask you to...
How dare you, sir?
I'm sorry, sir.
You've allowed no rebuttal whatsoever. We can answer every single one of these arguments. Every single one.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for...
We know now what you're trying to do.
Thank you, sir.
It's an affront to therapy and our clients.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, sir. And if there are no additional comments or questions, I'd like to ask the author to conclude the bill.
Thank you very much for the
Would you like to take a break?
No. I appreciate the conversation and the dialogue. When we hear about this notion of conversion therapy, it evokes a very troubling childhood of mine.
What about
Sir, if I could ask you to, sir, please.
This is, I understand that this is can be seen as a political issue, but if you implore me for one moment, as I work with many of you on a day-to-day basis, and I try to exercise respect and love, it was very difficult to present this bill because when thinking about childhood and that it would not be okay to be yourself. You heard testimony about suicidal thoughts. I have also had that. And that could conversion therapy help me? As a millennial, I grew up in a society in which there was so much hate towards my identity. You could not get married to the person you loved. I served in local office, as many of you did, as mayor. I could officiate a wedding, but couldn't get married myself. I could host a blood drive, but could not donate blood myself. I could welcome the Boy Scouts to City Hall to earn their merit badge, but could not serve myself in the Boy Scouts. And so when hearing about the pain and suffering of what these practices will do to individuals, it recalled a very dark day for me in which I lived the same sentiment and feeling. And I would like to believe that I stand before you as a stronger person because of the efforts and the recognition that we are all so equal people, and that there is no notion that you need to convert, and that you should be proud of your identity. You should be proud of who you are, that we celebrate yourselves, that you celebrate yourself. And this recognition of this as a fraudulent practice helps recognize the importance that our state is doing in protecting our consumers and the general public. And I ask for your kind consideration, sincerely, in recognizing that we want to narrowly focus this bill on the protections, and that if individuals truly have some challenges and struggles of their identity and their journey in life, that they still have the option to do so, as has been previously stated. And so with that, I again want to just share that this is a very personal issue to me and to many other Californians that are living in our state, and I hope that we demonstrate the courage of our convictions and demonstrate the practice of protecting every Californian. And with that, I respectfully ask for a vote.
Thank you very much, Mr. Low, and I want to thank everybody again for being here. I know this is a very emotionally charged issue, and so I want to thank everybody for being here. So with that, Madam Secretary, please call roll.
The motion is due pass to Judiciary Committee. Chow?
Aye.
Chow, aye. Kiley?
No.
Kiley, no. Baker?
Aye.
Baker, aye. Berman? Aye. Berman, aye. Calderon? Aye. Calderon, aye. Irwin? Irwin, aye. Mullen? Obernolte? No. Obernolte, no. Reyes?
Aye.
Reyes, aye. Ting? Aye. Ting, aye.
Your bill is out.